Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the project to you for the coming half hour, to explain our researches and our ideas, our dreams. It is done with many people. I will show you in a minute. This is what it is today. We call it the Valley of Gagarin, or the Gardens of Gagarin, for a couple of reasons. It is a concept, a master plan for this valley, as explained in the film before, which leads and afterwards to a real master plan, to the juridical and elements that are needed, and to the first tests and buildings. It is indeed a valley as an entity. It is therefore also a destination, and there are a lot of potentials in it. We call it now 10,000 voices, people that want to do something, and species. It is done through the DAR Foundation. This is our group of MVRDV. We do it with water management engineers from the Netherlands, with visualizations, with other partners from within Armenia, with students of different universities, also partly here in the audience, and with many people from the community of Gagarin and around. There were many, researchers involved, and we talked with them a lot on all kind of different aspects to learn and understand, the situation and the potential. I'm not Armenian. I'm not from the diaspora, but somehow I feel that I've become a little bit more Armenian these days, and I start to like it and to love it more and more. So this for me is an important project. During the meetings that we had, from social to very active elements, with many sessions that were on board, we tried to work on a kind of research-based, method to make things, kind of clear, to give them a reason, an argument, so that everybody can explain it to why we do certain elements. And that leads then to this dream that I'm going to present you today. This is what I want to show. So I make more clear what the assignment is. I take you through the vision and then to the proposal that we have made. What is the assignment? With the brief that was given to us already half a year ago was very precise. I think that's one of the important parts in planning, that the client and the group of clients say, what do we want to have in it? What does it say? What needs to happen in residences, in the agricultural direction, and in the commercial or economical component that is there? And it leads to different zones also in the area that will come, or that needs to come, in order to make a community that is, that is self-sustainable, and even that can mean something on a wider program and ambition. So what is then the spatial program, to give you a moment for that, if this helps? At the moment, there are 11,000 residents. We make a plan that also invite people to come, some 24,000 extra in the decennia to come. That includes then, an operation of, think about what kind of housing that could facilitate that, we could make, and how, the different components there are in order to specify the task of this valley to become like agricultural, super nice. Ranging from, a market to an agrocentrum, to a school, to also entertainment areas, and that leads to then different facilities that are there. Let me take you to the site for a moment. You've seen the film just a minute ago, but I still like this idea that Gagarin was, and I take you one step, up, like him, was the first to enjoy the view of our planet as a home for all people to take care of. And I think that image that he made, that was so important, because afterwards all the astronauts somehow convinced that this is a cute thing, this planet. And if you zoom in a little bit, and what can then the role of Armenia, or of in the northern part, this beautiful valley that we found. Next to Sevan Lake, as Annie explained, say, in the middle of anywhere, one could say. We imagined something that could be in between the mountains, like something that will help that, say, this agricultural direction. Yet a bit dry, extensive, but maybe with the help of technology and of ecology, we can change that. Gagarin Valley, named after its biggest town. Well, it's good and well located, close to Yerevan, in between Yerevan and Lake Sevan. On the way, say, to Georgia, there's a train, maybe it could run a little bit more in the future, to connect that. When you zoom in, then this is the topography and this is the site of the community as we are working upon. So on the northern and the southern part, mountains that are there, and in between the valley with, say, the 5 communities that are there. It has a long history already. And as explained, the researchers made indeed very close inventory of all the traces of the past, so that can be taken care of, not only to restore it and to improve it, but also to be inspired of it. I mean, you know, when I go to some of your monuments in Armenia and in the south, you have beautiful chapels somewhere in the mountain, and then next to it you make this noisy restaurant. Then I don't get it, because it's the mystical part of such a component deserves sometimes a space. So that's what we maybe can learn from it. And of course there are more epochs that are there. That's what I love about the country, because yes, for better and for worse, you made this new kind of elements that combines with this longer history and leads sometimes to fascinating, say, expressions of that moment. It has, of course, also a lot of amenities already, built by different, say, moments in time, schools and community centers that are taken into the position. It has agricultural activities coming up, not everywhere, as you can see it, so that gives also space for development. And there are elements that we could consider to help in the nearby future to give that a space. It has also, very specifically, a lot of, say, communal land. I know that's very specific for Armenia and some other countries. And with each other, then you can change and you can adopt that. And that can be done in harmony with the private elements that are in between in that way. It's composed out of many plots, and I come back to that. There's a given situation which we have to tackle, and some of them are very small, and others are bigger, and they represent a rich history. The valley has a delicate water balance. The river is there, but it's narrow. It is sometimes the water doesn't stay and goes away. It evaporates. That has a potential to be developed, to be clear, in that sense, with all its say constraints that are there. The traffic system, as I already explained, is basic, but we with the main artery and the train that can be there, and the road system that is there. That is. The climate is continental, mild, dry relatively, and with cold winters as we have now, and which leads to a combination of mountainous water and groundwater, say, storage potential. Okay, what's the ambition then to do? Here are some elements of how it was discussed to make this initiative and to bring it one step, say, further. It's clear it should be ecological, and to do it it should attract also people to invest and to visit also the place. And there are places which are gorgeous and wonderful to be there. It could and should create economies for the current population, for the newcomers with maybe new technologies, and creating therefore perspectives. This will attract people then to be there, to stay there, to work, to live, and to deal with it. That's the main source of making this valley alive. Let's have a scale comparison for a moment. How big is this valley? So let's compare it with other valleys in the world. I'll take you for a moment to San Gimignano in Tuscany. And if you look to our outline, in that way we could make a new San Gimignano in your area, if you wish, if that is. If I take you to Napa Valley, a highly successful agricultural element, then you have the same size as a part of it. That gives something. If I take you to this Valle Central, the Central Valley of Chile, which is enormous, but only, say, to look to Miguel Torres, one of the main characters of the best wines in Chile in that way, that's his estate, what you could do. Let me take you to Yangshuo, which I love because of its very special landscape that is there, and Yangshuo would fit in that sense to make you the potential. Or Bordeaux, just the area next to Saint-Emilion, how that would fit on it. So yes, and even Jordan Valley, which has all kind of political notions, but on the other hand is very successful in its, say, agricultural project. And that is, of course, a piece of Jordan Valley would fit in that case. And if I take you to the Sion area in Switzerland, yes, go there. Or I take you to Spitz in Austria, yes, it fits. So what is then the vision? If you look at this, what can, say, Gagarin's Valley then be part of it? So this name of 10,000 species is what we took as a gathering point in that way. And how can we work on that? First, we have to enhance and revitalize the current water system of the valley in order to equip it for this species. Some can do it already, some we can do it with less, say, water, and we want to give it more flexibility and also more potential is what it's very crucial to do that. So what can that be done? That can then attract indeed a wide scope of people that work with it, people that want to do a specific species, that want to set up a small boutique hotel, people that want to live there. A combination of people could be there. That can change the valley into something like this at that moment. Gradually, and step by step, this beauty could be imagined, this pearl somewhere in the north of Armenia. And if you look carefully with all these potential initiatives, already immediately it shows this kind of archipelago, or this mosaic of different, say, gardens that could be based on this current situation already. And loving it and making it into a diverse element. Imagine this, that we could do, such a kind of, is this now agriculture or is this a garden in that sense? And exactly, I think that is the poetic point that fits, I think, with your cultural, say, emotions in that way. And we want to serve a little bit, but that's between us today, on this kind of rumor. A rumor that there's somewhere on the planet, somewhere, a valley that does this action. Is what. This is today a little bit of spreading that rumor. This valley should be self-sufficient and efficient also in that way to do that. So we did calculations on what to do. So imagine that we have that amount of people and they produce everything for themselves. That they need basically this amount of hectares in that sense. That is about double of the existing non-mountainous areas of this area. Just to give you an idea. That means that we have to in that. And I think combinations are wonderful to imagine, because then you have to make solar cells and, say, at that moment, some kind of wheat to be important. That creates challenges, but also immediately more integration. So you see some of those potentials that we can imagine. Yes, you can have energy plus production. Yes, you can make houses and be natural, is what you already do. And that could lead to this kind of combination. So it is also an integrated system that will happen over time. So that means basically that there are different cycles from water, waste, nature, the agriculture, the energy, and the economy that needs to work together to create this kind of new agro center, if you could call it or give it a name. So how to make this valley? Then I come, I think, to the moment of visualization to understand what it is. We made a model. When you entered, you saw it a little bit, but later you will see more of it. This is how we built it in our office in Rotterdam, where people are like working on it, how to do it, and we are actually planting species and buildings in that model to make it visible as such. So I still love that mini film. It shows you immediately that how things are, how you do it by and testing it. I think this is a process that can come more. That model should be there. You should say something about it when that plot comes into action in that case. What are the ingredients of that master plan that we can imagine? So there's a series of elements. Let's start especially after the Soviet time, and a very important element, ownership, plots in that way, how to deal with that. So this is the form, this is the existing plots that are there. And they, as I said before, these are already 10,000 different plots that have different, say, shapes in that way. So with that, we can make the landscape. First, with a river, to be honest. Because here you can see, at the moment, it's a canal more than a river, and that needs to get more life in its way. So you see how it is going through it, how it's meant for speed and not for, say, catchment as such. And that is an important part to imagine. So there are, of course, other projects that you make side elements, that you give space for the river, that you keep it, that you stop it from evaporation, and that you treat it for filtration. Is, I think, like this project is an important one. So here an image of that filtration, how that we could do that, and how it can lead to zones that are sometimes water, but anyway under the soil, it will stay there with rocks, with stones to keep it and protect it. So I immediately go into the details, you can say, but that would change the current, say, treatment of the river into something which I think is beautiful, and less, say, only pragmatical. This is a new pragmatism that I could imagine, and that leads to an out of a perspective of this that gradually turns into something like that. Is it expensive? Costs a little bit. I need a bulldozer, and I need some extra soil on the soil bank, and then it's done. How long does it take? Well, if you give me permission, I will organize it, and it can be quick. So here how it will go through this model in our model. Next step is the water system further, if we did that. So this gives an image how there are current elements already in the underground. So we imagine different tools to make it, to have pieces where we can use plots for agroponics, to have, say, catchment areas, not only in the river, also higher up, to filtrate it next to the roads in that way, but also to have a dripping system to avoid evaporation. A palette of elements are needed to guarantee these directions. That means that from this map, we can start to make gutters on the edge of every plot. It's as simple as that, sometimes underground, sometimes halfway, and that can then be filled with water. They can be surrounded by plantations to reduce the wind, again to reduce evaporation, and to enlarge shading and biodiversity. We can add, say, some more reservoirs to keep the step system on the mountains and bring it then there. And together with the additional wells on the spots, we can do a kind of already a lot in the area. And then, of course, last but not least, the recycling system of that water, bringing back locally and some parts in decentralized ways. That will allow for a good base of agriculture. And actually, it's immediately beautiful what that could be. How these gutters could be, how it is surrounded with the trees and form the base of this valley. Let me go further. Because the next step is then the green framework that accompanies that. Here we show how we can plant along these gutters, along these small dredges, these poplars and some shrubs to make this landscape step by step in that sense. And actually it's immediately beautiful, you can see the pattern. It can shelter ourselves, can attract. We do that, the idea is when this is the plot line, to make a path, to make these poplars, and to make the gutters beside it, and to reorganize, therefore, the landscape in that way. Sometimes it can be bigger for a road or for a tractor to pass by. That means that every plot at that moment is accessible and we can steer it direction. Sometimes we make it bigger for the traffic reasons, and then we can start to dream about these kind of elements. And you use it already in that sense. And you do it in more places in the country. And even in winter, it makes sense somehow to work on that. What can we learn from that is basically it can form majestic landscape. It can make rooms in between for gardens and for plantations, and with, say, a variety of interiors that we could imagine. This would lead to characters that are already there, but now a bit hidden over the terrain, that form this kind of patterns. And it means that you can walk around everywhere. It is like a fine grain. It's almost like a park that brings you to every destination with this simple technique to do that. That creates a network, of course, for paths based on the existing, extended with the plot lines, and then form their very accessible level. We can make then also tracks. We choose some of them to enlarge them, to give a kind of routes for running or for walking or for certain trails. We can position certain kind of public transport buses that come in this area, and the other kind of, say, facilities that we could imagine for this kind of, for the pavements on this, that lead to this kind of healthier direction. So here an image on the model, how you can see that, and how always you can be accessible and have views on, hopefully, this richness of these different, say, elements. The agriculture comes in the landscape. And here you see a map of all the potential, say, zones that are there. The small ones and the larger ones. Which is good, because that creates a kind of flexibility in time from XS to XL. We can negotiate, can talk, we can formulate collaborations, and we can imagine different species on different, say, treatments and technologies on this different size. And that leads then to a possible, say, infill of optimized elements, say, from grass to lavender to apple trees to wheat. You can find, due to that, it's perfect situation. And immediately, this sorting act leads to this kind of beauty with the tracks, the paths, and the plantation in between here. And I show you different images of what that landscape could be then in these gardens. Next. So I can imagine that something will happen like that. At other places, this will happen. In another place, this combination will happen. Or we can imagine different sizes of built components. And then this will obtain different, say, structures. This is the same spot then in 5 years from now, where we could imagine an habitation in combination with different, say, species that are there. And that form then this hopefully unique typologies, from this agroforest, a test to combine food with dense plantation, wheat fields on this size, a nursery on this spot, a fish farm on another component, this shrubs garden that I could imagine, or this aquaponic center that could be done in that way. It's accompanied with energy in that landscape. It means that we need this amount, more or less, of, say, solar panels to make it working. We don't make windmills. That would destroy, especially the big ones. Excuse me, I have to be direct. But they are not you cannot use them in communities because they give noise and they give hinder on light. So that's why we choose for this solar element and smaller windmills when needed. That leads to this kind of combinations on that spots, as I showed some images just before, how that could be combined with fruit production. So here you see then already an ecosystem coming up with that energy elements. Next step, housing. Of course, we talk about 24,000 new elements over time. So what we propose is to use the villages as a base. That's where you start. You make them slightly better. You add a little bit. And you emphasize maybe one of them, Gagarin North, because of the station there, to take more on board of that. They will be dense in the heart and grow out into the landscape. So gradually they become part of these gardens or a part of the farms that is in it. So of course we need to make rules on architecture, how that can be. And we base it a bit on like these kind of combinations that are there, the stones and the green roofs. about, say, how to construct it in terms of wood or stone-like manners. But they should also be open up more to enjoy the view and to have a relationship with the landscape, so that gradually they become also contemporary or to create every time a big veranda. Adding things where you love landscape and love the environment more than being enclosed. And then, of course, the roofs is also a thing that we would like to continue with. It means maybe that we can make more species. If you have a lavender garden, I make lavender on the roof. If you have an apple garden, we do apples on the roof. And that leads then to, say, amazing combinations of that. Here you see a peaches orchard combination with how people that live along the orchard, or here in a fish pond, maybe this water house can then be part of that, or here a more baroque design of products can lead to a baroque composition with houses, or here how barleys can be combined with carrots, how strawberries can lead to strawberry mansions, how herbs can select and make these collective houses at that moment around the center. How communal elements can be placed in with a glass house direction, or with this kind of heat sheep cottages. You can imagine such a plot in that case. Or I love this one also, houses that form actually a kind of Armenian church in the landscape. So when I fly over it, then I can see also this church appearing. Or the fish farming window. Make one entity and you have this balcony looking over the fish. Could be, I think, a fantastic, say, momentum to do that. Or this sea buckthorn agrotourism element that could be imagined there, or this apartment building that loves silvopasture technology that can be there. And even, are we going to make a cross, yes or not, is a question. But I touch simply the freedom that I have now to discuss it in the carrot fields in this suggestion by some. So this is made by many people, these suggestions, by the students, by people of different offices to add to that. One person wanted to make even a bigger house out of stones with apartments in between. I said, wow, that would be super cool if that we could do. Or this one I love also. Just make a kind of super green ball somehow where you can live in and find your elements. Or even this kind of mosaic pool house which has maybe kind of motifs of other kind of elements. It leads to different typologies. That's what it is. Say from low density to village-like elements, to stacked variants on top of the halls, to more urban components. Why not, at a certain moment, to play in this future, but to give it character and quality, and to have a committee that does that. Here an example of the existing church in one of the communities, and how from this it could lead to maybe to an area where you want to sit and to stay around, where poplars are helping, where terraces are there, where roads are a bit reorganized as a starting point of that, say, puzzle or that mosaic. And when it becomes denser in other places, say, next to Gagarin, and you enter the zone with, say, traces of the past, I could imagine that the houses are a little bit stacked, that gardens are in between, and that you start to love also the older parts in the same moment. And that leads to these different, say, interpretations juxtaposed to each other. I go into the density one moment, into the denser part, to the, say, the northern part of Gagarin, where the train maybe stops more in the future. And we propose that to maybe base there an anchor stone, or one of the most important anchor stone. Say a park where we show all the species of the valley, and maybe of whole Armenia. See, to order them from A till Z in as a kind of library of, say, species. That are an arboretum, you call it, that you have also here in Yerevan, but that somehow immediately shows what you are doing, that you can walk around, you can see, you can learn from it, and it becomes this element which is surrounded by this density. That's also the place for the agricultural center, in the very heart, the epicenter of it. And what we imagine is when there are classrooms, you can, of course, put, these buildings that you have here, but if you do it like this, then somehow they love being together. They create a space where they can meet, but also where you can show basically all the species and how the treatments are done. It could be, say, the best, say, monitoring room of the valley. Here you show what things are done. You can point out it, and with our current techniques, we can turn it into this kind of cave, or this data cave that can be at that moment there. And then it's surrounded with this arboretum, which is there. And in order to make the arboretum a little bit bigger, and we can imagine that we use, say, material that reflects the gardens, and that it then therefore becomes, we did it a little bit in Rotterdam, but now we never made it this new kind of planet somewhere on the planet, is in that case. So here they will be scientifically show. I think Gagarin would love that. So, because he somehow thinks... He would, and it's a kind of anchor point that somewhere in the north this is happening. It's like a dance floor of species, I would say. Illuminated, every plant with its own element, an own light, and you walk around and you are part of that species in that zone and how it looks from above. We use that also, this new element, this next, say, planet that we could imagine, also to surround it with an organization of density. We add, like when you put a ball in the water, tuck, 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 you get circles of paths that surround it. Like this, or like this, or like this, or like this, can be imagined. And we use it for cars, we use it for people to go around, and that causes the circles of density over the existing plots, and that sort out this denser part up till it becomes part of the landscape. And then we filter it in with all the other kind of amenities, the schools that are needed, the boutique hotels, the places to work, the facilities, we call them. And here are they are not in one zone. That is normally happens, I think, in the tradition of planning in your country. For more than 50 years, you made a zone for industry, zone for working, zone for living. I hope that this can be a potential to mix them in, because that has a lot of potentials. For instance, a commercial center. I hate those things in the edges of the city, that you have to go there into these malls. So why not putting it next to the center and to use basically the same typology of houses that are then, say, combined to a kind of, say, world where you can shop but live also in the same momentum. We can do it also with our bio-industries, because they need, there will be more than only plants. There will be places where you store it, places where you turn it into soup or into or to recycled products. So how to combine that with that task? And we can imagine that we develop, say, a catalog of beauties by that. Not the stupid IKEA halls, but this kind of elements that you would like to see from a distance. But I can also imagine that they are like a piece of the landscape, that it's continued over there. These roofs, they don't use them too much, but that you add maybe like a house for your grandmother next to it, or that you live on top of it, or somewhere in the gardens, and immediately it's more lovable. It has no backsides in this, and it's there. I can imagine also some other characters that are there. Maybe this biodome could be made out of this. This silo, it could appear, and of course it's simple and maybe naive, but somehow someone put this in the model at that moment and say, wow, this is actually good advertisement of a certain kind of product that could be imagined. Or can Jeff Koons be part of our operation and make this fantastic apples in some of the gardens in that way? Or can we make even the biggest glass house in the world out of that industry? Or a mushroom farm that becomes like a hill almost, where you have in the interior, there's mushrooms there. And I get this kind of collection of interpretation. And I show it only to inspire. And of course, and then to talk. We need a committee that helps the coming time to convince you to do something, or to say to you, if you make a slaughterhouse, do it in this way, or can we do it? So I show some of the more specific ones that we already want to, that the client wants to invest in soon. The food market is an important one. Next to the highway, it can become an anchor. So let's imagine that the building has like terraces for every species as such, and that in the inside you have this food market as a whole that could be done. This is what we did in Rotterdam. Something like that could be imagined then with this hall, and something like this farms on top to show what you are doing is what it says. So then it becomes like a key connection between the landscape here from the highway, how the city center is, and how it's already a point. Yeah, it makes landscape in the third dimension. So when you're on the highway, then you know where you are, is what it says. So here we can go further. The art center. That was also a dream to have close to the center, also next to the station somehow, a plot where we can imagine that more artists work on the issue of food and turn that into a regular biennale or a regular, say, way of working on design with the different, say, farms that are there, or with helping to work on advertising. So imagine that there are boxes from every participant that are there, where, say, this can be, an artist can work in. And this kind of stack, this heap of artists and cultural people can lead to another interpretation of this painting that was a while ago. And here you can see it in the model on an edge, and how it can lead to, say, advertisements of pieces of art with terraces immediately, and they are simply like thrown over the landscape. And of course, sports is one of the parts of the program that we could imagine. And how to make a stadium in that sense? So somewhere next, after the off-ramp, we can imagine that in this field of specific species, we can dig a stadium. So just go down, and that it's part of the landscape, and that you then have a kind of say, stadium that you can use also during the day for your kids to be there and to hang out. Again, a garden-esque element. But that we can continue with that, and with what that could be. So I imagine that recycling could lead to a garden, can also be a building. This is the amount of recycling that we estimate when we have 35,000 people on this area. So how to do that? We can manifest that as a kind of machinery. We can imagine about agro-tech centers. So here, one student put this on like a house of measurements. I would love it to show that with this garden. Or, of course, the facilities of hotels, boutique hotels, bigger hotels. And when someone put Gagarin on the picture, then we are in a certain tradition, but somehow it's beautiful that he looks at what we are doing together and celebrates on his position somewhere in the sky about this. And then I come to the epilogue of this storyline, that I am aware that this is our necessity to do it, and that somehow Gagarin makes us aware. And that turns then into this dream, how during the night and the day, you see the species on the roofs. You see the artist colony. You see the gardens by the forest. A drone flies over it. I know, it's not a perfect model. The gardens of the Arboretum. The density that surrounds it. Vertical villages, because we want to live in villages and not in... We want to be your parents or your next door. And they have other kind of houses, other kind of species here in the strawberry fields. They become denser. Sometimes this stone is appearing. Our artists again. The biodome, the wheat houses, and the herbal gardens. Existing Gagarin. Nearing perfection is what the box tells you. Thank you very much. I know this is our dream with a big group of people, and I hope that we invite you to think with us, also later downstairs to look at it. This is how was now or just before and how it will be and in the years to come. Of course, we have to work on this together, and that hopefully gives them a base for Gagarin's Valley, and this is the concept master plan. Thank you for your attention already.